If I were a different kind of fantasy manager, I would look at what Christian McCaffrey's doing and say, he is amazing, full stop. But because I'm trying to figure out how we can prepare for next season, I have to look at what he's doing this year in the context of how he's going to be ranked next summer, and therefore where managers should draft him, if at all, next summer. Um, Christian McCaffrey is about to go over 400 touches for the third time in his career. Very few running backs have done that. He had 27 last night. I found it interesting that on that final significant drive that the Niners had, where they were milking the clock up 2 scores, it was McCaffrey who was getting much of the love on offense. Brian Robinson had 5 touches. Robinson has had 6, 7, 8 touches in a lot of weeks. That's been great, but it hasn't in any way changed the fact that McCaffrey is on this extraordinary pace for assuming the Niners play the next 2 games. I'll get to that in a moment. He'll be over 400 touches by the playoffs, and if they play 2 playoff games, if they win one, he could be pushing 450 by the time this season is over. That's a huge, huge, huge red flag. If you're a fantasy manager and you drafted him or acquired him during the season, you're loving this. And why shouldn't you? I mean, he's probably helping you win your league. That's the whole point. My job, as I see it, is to put some context into this and say, yeah, we can celebrate what he's doing, and it's going to make things a lot harder for him, and by extension for fantasy managers who invest in him next year. As I've pointed out before, old running backs, 27 or older is what I, term as old. But obviously old is relative. So, you just go with the numbers, and 27 seems to be this point where running backs are no longer in their prime, and they're more often than not, they're shifting into post prime. That nearly every one of those running backs throughout NFL history, all but 2 out of more than 25, has regressed, usually significantly the following season when they've had over 400 or more touches. The 2 exceptions ticked up very, very minimally. So it wasn't even like they made big gains. It was just they didn't really go down. That was the key. I find it interesting because Robinson, even though he's been fairly involved, he could probably still be more involved in some of these games, and the Niners would still win. Isaac Guerrero was a solid spot starter last year as a third string running back, but he's been mostly silent. It would be easy to see a scenario where instead of Christian McCaffrey getting 23 touches a game or whatever he's getting, it's roughly that, instead of that, if he were getting, let's say 19 a game, still a lot, and you give an extra 3 or whatever to Guerrero, and you give an extra 1 to Robinson, it doesn't change that much in terms of their win chances, but it means that McCaffrey is held in check a little bit more based on his history of getting hurt the season after a huge workload. One would think that the Niners would consider that and use the running backs that they have. Now, I don't know. Maybe Guerrero is not looking as good in practice this year, and so therefore they're not confident about him. And so it's, McCaffrey is the uber alpha, and Robinson coming in as a mid to low use 1B, essentially, with not much fantasy upside. But there's a cost to it, and the cost to it is going to be, in all likelihood, next year. If the Niners were, a near lock to get the one seed, we could see a scenario where McCaffrey could be, could take a rest in week 18 along with other starters. And that would be really useful, for him in terms of not going over 400 touches in the regular season and maybe not having more than 420 when it's all said and done, which is still incredibly high, but not as bad as pushing 450. Or on the flip side, we could see a scenario where the Niners were out of the playoffs. Let's say they had a down season, and right now they were 7-8 or worse. And you could see a scenario where McCaffrey would probably sit one game, week 18, or if they were out of the playoffs right now, we might even see that they decide McCaffrey's had enough this year. He's been worked enough. He's pushing almost 400 touches. Let's get Robinson and Guerendo involved and go from there. And we'll get McCaffrey back in the fall. But that's not the case. So it's a weird situation where McCaffrey is elite, which everybody loves. He is absolutely necessary for a team that needs to win games to get good playoff positioning, seed positioning, so that they can try to make a run at a Super Bowl. And in addition to that, they have these other assets in the backfield, one of whom is being utilized modestly, and the other one is completely ignored. I find it interesting. It might not even matter in terms of next year, whether he gets 400 touches or 450, he's still going to be risky. But my issue is if he's pushing 450, that puts that's a more extreme example of a point of no return for a running back, especially a running back pushing 30 years old, as he will be, to try to come back from that and be anywhere close to his ADP is completely unrealistic. His ADP at this rate will be top 5, almost automatically. I don't think it'll be 1 because of his age. I don't think it'll be 2, but I think it'll be somewhere in 3 to 5. And if you're drafting him next year after he has 400 plus touches at the 3 to 5 spot, you should expect that he's going to miss 5 plus games. And you should expect that he is not going to be nearly as efficient as he was this year. That's what we're up against right now because of all these, issues at play with the Niners being competitive, with McCaffrey being dominant and being utilized, and the fact that they're not trusting Robinson enough, perhaps, and they're definitely not trusting Guerendo. That's going to set up a situation next year where I would just say, no matter what his ADP is, and I expect again to be top 5, you just fade him because who wants to deal with McCaffrey part 3 coming after a 400 plus touch season? We've seen this play out before 2 other times, and we've seen it play out before dozens of other times for other running backs. We kind of know how it's going to play out again. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. We'll see you tomorrow.